Hello, Allan. This Allan Finney. He's the founder of Companionship of the Sacred Vine. I'd like you to introduce yourself, tell us about your relationship with ayahuasca, and explain a little bit this concept of companionship of the sacred vine that for me sounds a little bit like coming from the Lord of the Rings Brotherhood or something, yeah?
Okay, sure, yeah. I started taking ayahuasca when I was 59. I went for a month-long trip to Peru, and I was working with some lineage Shipibo shamans down there and started on my healing journey. So that was 7 years ago. And after my first set of ceremonies, I thought, wow, that's it, I'm cured. But no. But it was amazing, because my whole life I was looking for something, but I didn't quite know exactly what that was. But it was like, it's like a lot of people, the turning point in my life, I look at the turning point in my life was after my first ayahuasca ceremony. So now things are revealed. Now you get to understand the nature of this reality. So then, and the reason I went to Peru in the first place, my daughter and I wanted to do ayahuasca. So I went on the first trip. A couple months later, I went on another trip with my daughter. If I can recommend anything to anybody, if you can go have ceremonies with your family members, I highly recommend that. That is an amazing experience. We've done maybe 80 or 90 ceremonies together, and every time it's just opens up so many different walls get knocked down. Anyway, that's beautiful. Anyway, so I'm going to say, I started Ayahuasca Canada, which is a website basically to help people, because it was the same thing when I was looking for ayahuasca. It's like, how do you find this? Where do you go? It was such a big mystery, right? So I put up a website and people email me. I say, well, here's what happened. I did some videos on the Ayahuasca Canada YouTube channel. And so I started working into the medicine, trying to give back to people and help people out. So then the Companionship of the Sacred Vine, about, God, that's got to be over 4 years ago now. I was in a ceremony one day, and it was like, I don't know where the idea came. It's just like everything else with ayahuasca. But it was like, oh, well, there is a way of getting legal ayahuasca ceremonies in Canada, because through my work with Ayahuasca Canada, people would contact me and they say, well, is this legal? Can I, because people like in government positions or police officers or first responders, they're not going to risk a criminal conviction because of their jobs, right? So I started looking into it, and there is a way of getting legal ceremonies in Canada. So I started looking into the legalities of that. And then I started organizing with contacts that I had made. I started organizing an organizing committee, and I started working with my Shipibo shamans in Peru. And so, and I was also recruiting members, because when we put in the application, it was important to have members, a congregation. So I spent about a year organizing all that and getting information together for our application. And then it's over 2 years now, I put in an application for an exemption. Mm-hmm. And how that works in Canada is it's a religious exemption. So there's no other way to take ayahuasca legally in Canada except through a religious exemption. And there are churches that have gotten religious exemptions in Canada. The first one was Santo Daime, got a religious exemption. It took them 16 years from when they started the application to when they got the exemption, 16 years. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's crazy, right? But after they got, oh, I think my camera fell over.
Okay.
How's that? Can you see me?
Yeah.
So then some other churches got exemption applications. So we put in our application, and that was over 2 years ago. So and then when I started working with Health Canada, I knew they were just delaying things. I mean, they were deliberately delaying the process. So in one email, I'd get, oh, we need your criminal record check, Allan. So I go, okay, I'll go get my, and then 3 months later, they asked for the criminal record checks of our organizing committee. And I'm like, this could have all been put in one email and been done with. So you could tell right away that organizationally or institutionally, they're not very keen on having ayahuasca ceremonies. Now, the difference between our application and the churches that have been granted application or granted exemptions is that ours is based on traditional Amazonian ayahuasca ceremonies, like Shipibo. The tradition I come from is Shipibo, so it's Shipibo, but it's, you know, they're very similar traditions throughout the Amazon jungle. So that's the difference between our application and something like Santo Daime or UDV or Barranquilla, where they have, it's a syncretic church. I'm sure you're aware of that. So they mix traditions. So sometimes that becomes a problem for people. They don't want to have, go to a ceremony like that. And it's not my tradition, so we put in for my tradition. So we would be the first application in Canada that I'm aware of, because they don't talk about this, but that I'm aware of, where it would be for traditional ayahuasca ceremonies. The Companionship of the Sacred Vine itself is kind of like an umbrella organization. So I have half a dozen facilitators that I recommend to people in Canada, right? And they're all based around traditional Amazonian ayahuasca ceremonies. So the idea is that the Companionship of the Sacred Vine is kind of the umbrella organization. So if you're operating a facility or you're a facilitator, then you apply under our banner because we've already gotten the exemption application. So then we just say, oh yeah, we've got another center here, another center there, you know, so people can put in the centers. So the Companionship of the Sacred Vine takes care of all of the bureaucratic requirements, the reporting requirements, the health questionnaires, the you know, how much ayahuasca we use. You know, there's all these reporting requirements. So that's taken care of, so that whoever's running the ceremonies, they can just run their ceremonies and we can look after the paperwork.
Okay, so why
in a nutshell.
Why do you think it's so important to do the ayahuasca ceremonies there in Canada? Because if you could travel with your daughter or yourself in the Amazon, everyone in Canada could do the same. Why do you think it's important to have at home this possibility?
Good question. Most of my ceremonies, I needed a lot of ayahuasca ceremonies. I was dealing with things I didn't even have any idea of things I was dealing with before I started. So for me to go to Peru, it's beautiful. I love the jungle. I love my people I work with in Peru, but it's very expensive. You know, it's not something that I can just, oh, I need some ceremonies this weekend, I'm working on something, I just go to the jungle. And for us, we maintain relationships with people in the jungle. So if people in Canada, we can recommend places in Peru that they go to or people to talk to down there. But most of my work was in Canada. I've done maybe 40 ceremonies in the jungle. I've done, 90 ceremonies in Canada. And it was just because I needed to do that work, And if I had to go to the jungle, I'd still be, back where I was 4 years ago, trying to do more ceremonies. I mean, when I started the work, I would make progress, but then it was always up until, I'm going to say, a couple of years ago, where it was always, you need another ceremony, Allan. You need another ceremony. You need another ceremony. And finally, we got to the point where it's like, okay, we're done for now. And I'm like, what? Yeah, you don't have to go after, because I was always looking for the next ceremony. I always had more work to do. Yeah. So at some point, and now my ceremonies now, I mean, I don't do them very often, but I just enjoy them so much. It's just a reinforcement. But so this becomes a problem. People start on the path, maybe in Peru or maybe with a couple of ceremonies. Then they find, oh, I need some more ceremonies. I'm working on something. It's a process, right? So now what do they do? They're going to get on a plane and fly to the jungle. It doesn't work like that. So, and especially for people like with PTSD, or where they're working on some very specific thing, they start the work. Well, they need another 2 or 3 or 4 more ceremonies, and so where do they get the ceremonies? It just becomes problematic.
So even if it is not legal, because if this in a scheduling 3 in Canada, so it's not legal yet, there are still ceremonies.
All the time.
Yeah,
all the time.
Under the radar, in a clandestine or secret or discreet way, they are doing the same that they are doing in many countries in Europe and the rest of the world.
All the time. And all of my ceremonies in Canada were illegal. I never, they were illegal. And it used to be like when I first started doing, I started working with shaman in Canada. He was Shipibo trained shaman, so I started helping him out. So for us to get the medicine in Canada, it used to be no big deal. I mean, you put it in the mail and then, in a month it shows up in Canada, no problem. But now when I'm talking to my facilitator friends, their medicine isn't getting through. Their medicine isn't getting through. It's getting confiscated more and more and more and more all the time. So it seemed like how this worked was, it used to be they didn't care about the medicine coming into Canada. I mean, or now they're more vigilant or something. But right now, a friend of mine in Ontario, he works with veterans with PTSD. So the psychologist at the base, the Canadian Forces base, he's not supposed to, but he works because it's illegal, right? But he will send suicidal veterans over to my friend. My friend will do ceremonies with them. And I would love to go into one of those ceremonies. It's just powerful, the transformation of these veterans, suicidal veterans, and they just turn their lives around. But right now, he has some ceremonies scheduled for August for some more veterans. None of his medicine is getting through. It used to be that Canada Post, you could always get medicine through. And then we were doing some ceremonies in British Columbia, and all of a sudden Canada Post, it became a problem to get the medicine through. The border, Canadian Border Agency was confiscating a lot of the medicine. So then we switched to DHL Courier, and those guys, the medicine would come through all the time. But now in Peru, when our friends that cook the medicine for us, the shamans down there, they can't send that through DHL anymore because of they have some new rule. There's a liquid or something. So now we're back to Canada Post, but it's difficult. It's very, very difficult to get the medicine into Canada now. So
how did it start to change the situation about the confiscation of the medicines?
I'm going to say in the last 6 months or so, that when I've been talking to my facilitator friends, you know, they're getting a little desperate for getting their medicine in, and this, you know, I see this as kind of a logical progression of the authorities. Before, nobody gave it much thought because you could always get your medicine through, and the medicine was coming in, and nobody seemed to be paying attention to, you know, from an enforcement point of view, because, you know, as you're aware, that if it ever got into a court of law, the authorities would look pretty bad, but they have other ways of working, right? So now they're clamping down at the border, so, you know, the medicine isn't getting into Canada. So this seems to have occurred probably within the last 6 months, I would say, that more medicine is getting confiscated, but it's becoming really critical now. So we're trying to figure out, you know, how do you get the medicine into Canada? That becomes a problem.
This is funny. I don't think it's a coincidence, but 6 months ago is when these operations in Spain, in the Spanish ceremonies, started to happen. So last November, and then in Italy, it was banned like 1 year ago. So I think something really has happened, has changed over the decision makers in this aspect. They are in Vienna and maybe in the States about ayahuasca. Probably, my guess is ayahuasca has been many years under the radar. Yeah.
Yeah.
We knew because we went to the ceremonies, we went to Peru and everything, and then this started the Netflix thing, the people, the celebrities talking about their ayahuasca ceremonies, and suddenly it's like, whoa, we have an issue here, yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, because we have the court case that we're coming up, I'm having to do a lot of research into, you know, how ayahuasca was made illegal to begin with. And, you know, the United Nations conventions never outlawed natural plant materials. And I'm going, well, wait a minute. They didn't ban the natural materials. The International Narcotics Control Board issued statements saying, no, this isn't for natural plant materials. And yet when the legislation shows up in Canada, and I'm sure all around the rest of the world, all of a sudden ayahuasca is put under there. So how did that happen? You know, this is the pharmaceutical industry, the big corporate interests. They don't want to see people being cured, people being healed by ayahuasca. It cuts into their profits, you know.
Yeah.
So I believe it's kind of a slow creeping enforcement, like you say. 6 months ago, 8 months ago, oh yeah, now it's time to put a lid on this.
Yeah.
You know. So
yeah. I like to ask you about the actual legal situation of ayahuasca in Canada. But first of all, I wanted to read the information we do have right now and tell us if it is right, or if it is wrong, or if it is not updated, okay? This is taken from ICER's webpage that is very well done. And it says, at present, there is no legal protection in Canada for ayahuasca use by any groups other than Santo Daime Church and Unión de Vegetal. In Canada, it is illegal to import, possess, sell, distribute, or administer ayahuasca, not only DMT, but also Harmalol and Harmaline, are classified under the Schedule 3 drugs under the 96 Controlled Drugs and Substance Act. Is this accurate?
Absolutely, yes, it's absolutely accurate. That's a legal situation in a nutshell. It's illegal, but the laws are on the books, but they don't arrest anybody for ayahuasca. They confiscate it. They'll give you a warning. They'll take the medicine, but they don't want to put it in a court of law because, as you're well aware, it would look pretty bad if somebody contested this in a court of law and you had experts testifying about how safe ayahuasca is and the results of it. And so it's a very, our ceremonies are underground, but the enforcement is underground as well.
Yeah. So what is the aim of your companionship in this aspect? What will you be like your, let's say, ideal situation in order to work like safely with this medicine from the Amazon?
Sure. And how that would look is that there's facilitators that are operating in Canada right now. I have a long history with a number of these facilitators, like 6-7 years. I've been with them in ceremonies. I've talked to them. We have established working relationships. I recommend people to go to these facilitators, and then so those people, after especially for first timers, because I like listening to the stories, but I also want to hear what their experience was with the facilitators that I recommend. So they tell me, yeah, these guys are wonderful. Oh yeah, this was beautiful. Oh, this happened, that happened. So I get feedback on the different facilitators that are working in Canada. And so how this would work is we would establish, like right now, people have centers in Canada. So that facilitator would have a center in Canada. And now we would apply for legal ceremonies there under the Companionship of the Sacred Vine. So we get granted that. So now they can import the ayahuasca and they can schedule ceremonies. So on the Companionship of the Sacred Vine, the website itself, everything would be automated. So you put in your health questionnaire, the dates of the ceremony would be on a calendar. The facilitator contact information would be on the calendar. Everything would be done through the website so that we have a record of who's at the ceremony, how much ayahuasca was used, the dates of the ceremony. We also have a very good friend of mine, Reverend Rick Brandel from Ontario. He's a trained integration coach. Well, I mean, he's worked with the medicine for 20 years, but he also got certified through, I forget, there's some course that you can get certified through. So he's in charge of the integration program. So on the website, you have a forum, just like any forum that you have. Say if you're discussing computers, there's a forum for computers. Well, this is a forum for integration, so people can, and I do this anyway. Like if people go to ceremonies, I tell them, look, if you're having a problem, phone me up. So I am already doing this with the people that I work with, but this would be on a more formal basis where people that are in a ceremony, they can talk to other people. They can get Rick online, they can get me online. There's certain people that they can get online, and I've helped lots of people integrate their ceremonies and that sort of thing. So it's not just for the ceremonies, it's when I say the companionship, that was very deliberate. There's a companionship here. It's nobody is higher than anybody else or lower than anybody else. We're just all friends exploring the medicine, and some of us have more experience, some of us have less experience. But for the people with less experience, come in. If you want to do some ayahuasca, you can talk to people in your own language that understand Canadian culture or whatever whatever that is, but the difficulties in Canada and that sort of thing. So you have local people helping local people. So the idea with the companionship is that we want to have a center in every province and territory in Canada. So that's a long-term goal, because, and it's just from my experience, because I get somebody saying, oh, do you have, is there ceremonies going on in Calgary? I say, no, I don't have a facilitator in Calgary, but I've got some people in British Columbia. I've got some people in Ontario. So, you know, we'd like to have that available locally with people.
Yeah, and for instance, you have something like a ethic code or like a manual for working like properly, because I think if not, it's a little dangerous. You know, Plantaforma, the organization I'm involved with, we did this 10 or 12 years ago, this ethic code, in order to split, to have it clear what is the proper way to work with ayahuasca, because we think, maybe you are agree with that, that not all the people working with the sacred vine are doing it properly. Yeah, the vine is sacred, but the humans are humans. Yeah, and they make mistakes.
Yes, that's true. We have, if you go on our website, all of that is publicly available. How the ethics, how the facilitator is supposed to work with people, our code of conduct, all of that is on the website. So, for example, if you're a person in Canada and you go to a facilitator and you know, he says, well, this isn't right. This isn't what he was doing. So now we can go back and check, and that person can look at the code of conduct for the facilitators and tell us, hey, no, he wasn't doing this, or he wasn't doing that. You know, so there is a way of vetting and getting the feedback about how the ceremonies are conducted, because yes, of course, as you're very aware, how are people using the medicine? I mean, that always becomes an issue. So yeah, we have that, you know, that's from our organizing committee. The organizing committee included our shaman friends in Peru, and also people that were very experienced with the plant medicines here in, well, not only here in Canada, but also abroad. We had a couple of people that I knew that I'd met from abroad that were also facilitators. So when we all get together, we say, well, what does this look like? What's the code of conduct here? What's supposed to happen in a ceremony? What isn't supposed to happen in a ceremony? And a really good resource for that is ICEERS. They have very, very solid information. So that was kind of how we set all that up.
And I think in the US there is this religious exception you talk about. This about religious freedom. I think there is around 250 churches working right now with ayahuasca. I like to, yes, I think they have the situation very similar to Canada, because you are not allowed to have ceremonies like in a traditional way. But if you are under the umbrella of a church, then it is possible. So it's many organizations that are doing all the process to become in a church, in a religious institution. I like to know what are the differences or similarities between Canada and the US in the legal terms for this issue.
Well, I'm not that familiar with the United States, but I do know that they are like have some churches, you know, that are operating legally there, and I'm not exactly sure how, because you know it's two different set of regulations in Canada, and in Canada it's you know, you have to apply through Health Canada for religious exemption, and then they have monitoring requirements, and they will issue an import permit for ayahuasca. So whoever is in Peru, they can just go locally and get an export permit. So then that becomes illegal. The border's not going to going to confiscate the ayahuasca. So I'm pretty sure it's probably the same thing that's going on in the United States, but I just don't have contacts. You know, most of my work has been on the Canadian situation, and but I'm pretty sure it's probably along the same line.
Yeah. Do you think is going on like a witch hunt for ayahuasca and shamanism and in Western countries? Do you think this is related, or how does it fit this traditional way of giving ayahuasca? I mean, the Shipibo one, for instance, with the so-called psychedelic renaissance, because psychedelic renaissance is very fashion right now, but this very related to the medical way of working with these medicines, different psychedelics. And then there is ayahuasca that I do not consider to be a psychedelic, but I know from a certain point of view could be considered like a psychedelic itself.
Yeah, there's right now in Canada, there's people that are working on like psilocybin. It's very popular. Microdosing, you know, and I differentiate that from my ayahuasca experience, certainly, as I consider this work sacred. The scientists, and everybody comes at it from a different viewpoint, and I don't fault anybody for their viewpoint of how they come about it, but you know, with the PhDs and the medical, and they're trying to develop medicine, you know, so if you have this or if you have that, but ayahuasca goes so far beyond that, that it's, you know, for me, it's a sacred experience, and hence the religious application. For the people that are working with psychedelics, they have to have, you know, the gold standard double-blind trials, and, you know, to get something approved or whatever. And the religious exemption that we're working on has none of those standards. I mean, of course, there has to be safety information that's brought about with it, but it doesn't have the medical standard that you know, like the psilocybin people, or LSD or something along those lines. But it's two different things. To me, it's two completely different approaches to this.
Yeah. Do you think science itself will ever discover or uncover all the secrets of the ayahuasca?
It's interesting. That's a very interesting question, because you know, I discuss things with our facilitator friends and everything. Science, here's what our current thinking: science killed magic. So with the scientific method, with this science research base, with the reductionism, ayahuasca is an expansion. Science is a reduction. So they're at diametrical odds. But having said that, there are a certain amount, I don't think it's mainstream science by any chance, but there's a certain amount of scientists that get to a point where they're agreeing with the Buddhists. They're agreeing with a conscious universe, which for me, in my worldview, the universe is conscious. You know, there's no doubt about it. The difference between a quantum physicist telling me the universe is conscious, and in my own experience, the physicist can't tell me how to interact with that consciousness. Whereas ayahuasca allows me to interact with that consciousness. And that's where I see the big differentiation. Science can tell me all they want. Oh yeah, the universe is conscious. Oh yeah, how do I interact with the consciousness? This is what ayahuasca does. That's the expansionism versus the reductionism. And that's, to me, I think maybe at some point science will understand, you know, the magic of this work, or
that's maybe. Very interesting. That's very interesting what you say. Really interesting. So I've been taking a look to your website, to this Companionship of the Sacred Vine,
Yep.
and you started like a campaign, a crowdfunding, in order to what is the purpose of this campaign?
Okay. We have, because after, you know, I knew that Health Canada was not treating us fairly or properly. So at one point, I had answered every question. You know, we went through a dialogue. They asked, what about this? What about that? What about the other thing? So then every month, I would send an email in asking about the progress of our application. So they would come back to me with an email that says, we have no service standards for your application. And what that just means, what they're telling me is, we can take as long as we want. So this, I would send in an email. Oh, we have no service standards. Send in another email. We have no service standards. We have no service standards. So I got, this can't be right. So I started looking into the legalities of it. And that's when I started corresponding with a fellow by the name of Paul Daly at the University of Ottawa. He's kind of a famous guy in human rights and in administrative law, which administrative law is, if you're not being dealt with fairly by bureaucracy, there's relief through the courts. I don't want to get in a court battle with anybody. But anyway, so I started corresponding with Paul Daly, asking for, you know, can you get me a lawyer? What can we do? So he started getting interested in the case. And he said, you know, Allan, if they're saying there's no service standard, there's a Supreme Court ruling that says they have to respond. They can't just ignore it. So this is where the problem came in. He says there's this Supreme Court ruling. So he said, ask him about that. And so I'm very polite when I deal with these guys, because I mean, they're the only people that can help me with anything. So I very politely said, oh, I understand there's no service standard, but I came across this information about the Supreme Court ruling. What about that? You know, I just very gently asked, what about the Supreme Court ruling? And now, after that email, they will not respond to any of my inquiries. I put in an email and I say, can you give me the progress of our application? Nothing. No.
So they feel like you're treating them in a way, yeah?
I don't know, but that's against the law. That is not how the regulations work, right? So then at that point, I went, well, I have no, you know, and I don't know if Paul Daly did this deliberately or not to force the issue.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it forced the issue. It said to Health Canada, look, there's a Supreme Court ruling. You guys are federal bureaucracy. You're supposed to make a decision. What are you doing? And they just quit responding to us. So that's when, again, I went back to Paul Daly and I said, do you have some lawyers? You know, how much is this going to cost? So he recommended some lawyers for me. And, you know, one lawyer came to me and said they want a $10,000 retainer, $50,000 for, and I went, Jesus, this isn't gonna work. So the more I talked to Paul Daly, he said, well, Al, he says, I'll take the case on for you. And I was like, what? Yeah. He said, but I have to bring in another person because he says, I understand, like he is an expert. Supreme Court of Canada has quoted his blog in rulings in Canada, right? I mean, this guy is a recognized expert in administrative law. And then he says, but I have to bring in a friend of mine because she knows how to handle the courtroom procedures properly. And I said, okay. I said, Paul, what's this going to cost? He says, well, initial filing, $3,000, total cost, $20,000. And I mean, I was getting much higher quotes from other lawyers. And so then at that point, you know, I had to put up the crowdfunding and oh yeah, well, The other lawyer he brings in, and this kills me, is Alyssa Tompkins, who is a partner at Gowling, which is an international law firm, and she's a partner at the firm, and she is a constitutional law expert in Canada. She's argued cases in front of the Supreme Court of Canada, Supreme Court of British Columbia, Supreme Court of Ontario. I mean, you know, you can't make this up. Ayahuasca, and you're well aware of this, that ayahuasca makes connections, you know, and I just look at it and I go, wow, there's another connection in Nike, you know, that, how did that show up? I don't know. So that's where I'm at right now, is doing the crowdfunding and trying to, you know, find some way of financing this. If I had $20,000, I'd just give it to him and away we go. But I don't have that personally available to give to them. But
yeah. Well, good luck with that, because we started our own crowdfunding like this winter also. We finally achieved it for doing some legal issues, but especially to doing some documentaries that I'm doing right now.
Nice.
Yeah. Probably maybe I'm asking you for permission to include some of the words you said about this legal process of Canada, because I think it's pretty interesting. So one of the issues we are covering is especially the legal issue of ayahuasca, because we do have clear what you say. Yeah, it's not illegal. It's not illegal, but they are trying to make it like doing these little tricks, like it contains DMT. Well, we know that oranges contains DMT. They are not illegal. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Your head contains DMT, so you know by Canadian law, your head is illegal in Canada. So be careful.
Exactly. And as you say, what we think is it works. It works, and it works once. So maybe it's people that are in antidepressive or are in you know, this really hard situations, PTSD or whatever, and it's suddenly that they have this remedy, this medicine, and break up the reality. Yeah, so it really works. It really works very hard. I don't like to be conspirationist. I don't think that this is any kind of complot, but there is interest. Of course, there are economic interest, and maybe someone doesn't want to have this really fully available for the people. Yeah.
I don't look at it as a conspiracy. You know, I don't deal with theories. My, you know, way back when I was a journalist, my training is journalism. So I look at the pharmaceutical industry. If you go onto PubMed, which is the database for doctors, researchers, whatever, and if you put in their pharmaceutical industry corruption into the search engine in PubMed, you'll get over 100 citations, articles, books. You know, there's entire books written on pharmaceutical industry corruption. In Canada itself, Health Canada, there's a book. It's a book by a whistleblower in Canada, Dr. Shiv Chopra. And the title of his book, he spent 38 years inside Health Canada. And the title of his book is Health Canada Corrupt to the Core. And him and a group of 5 other scientists, they would have gag orders against them. They would take on prime ministers. They would testify in front of Senate and Commons committees about the corruption within Health Canada. And how that works is that industry representatives are put into positions of power, and those industry representatives are technically the bosses of you know, the working scientists, right? So they say, oh, no, we can do this. You know, they're in there representing the industry. And Shiv Chopra spent 38 years battling that kind of, I call it institutionalized corruption. So, you know, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's a fact. That's documented. It's not just me, you know, wearing my tinfoil hat sitting in my basement. This is recognized within the industry. So
absolutely. And I'm talking about pharmaceuticals. I just remember that there is this company, and I think it's from Canada. It's called Filament. This is the one that has invented, or they are about to launch these ayahuasca pills. This is Filament, yeah. This is Canadian, yeah. What's your opinion on this? Because I just translated this article 1 month ago. Very interesting. This woman, I don't remember her name, but she wrote this article about cultural appropriation and this mess, what she considered to be an absolutely mess, to convert this ayahuasca experience in just one pill and take you at home at whatever.
You know, here again, we get people that don't understand this medicine, that are working in this arena. I talk to people that are doing ayahuasca surveys, right? So they'll ask me, Allan, do you want to go, you know, can you fill out our survey? So I said, yeah, okay. Who's conducting the survey? Oh, well, this PhD, that PhD, this organization. I say, okay, how many times have you guys done ayahuasca? Oh, no, we've never done ayahuasca. Like, no, we're not going to do something crazy like that. So how do you work in this arena if you don't understand the medicine in its traditional sense? Well, the problem becomes, you know, it's another drug that somebody's discovering out of the Amazon, or we're going to put it in a pill. If you understood this medicine, you would never even consider doing something like that, you know. So you know, it's what do I think about an ayahuasca pill? I think it's one of the craziest things I've ever heard.